This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Weather My Trains. Hey, are you like me and the thought of doing a DIY weathering job on an expensive engine leaves you in fear? It's time to call in Rob Arsenault at Weather My Trains. Do what thousands of satisfied customers have done and let Rob help you notch up the realism on your layout with beautifully detailed weathering on your locomotives and rolling stock. To see what Rob can do for you, check out his website at weathermytrains.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Making his return back to Around the Layout, coming to us from East Peoria, Illinois, Issac Fabris. Issac, welcome back.
Howdy.
It's good to have you back here. Been watching you on your Facebook group and tons of updates. And then, of course, all the fun stuff that you've been doing with a good group of friends out there that are familiar to us on the podcast. So really looking forward to catching up with you and finding out what's going on in the world of the CNIC Heyworth Spur.
Cool. Glad to be here.
Why don't you get us up to date? It's been a while since we've chatted with you. August 30th, 2022 is the last time you were on the show. You told us about your model railroading journey that led you to building the CNIC Heyworth Spur. But why don't you get us kind of a little recap of your layout and kind of what you're looking to accomplish with it as you're building it?
Sure. And before I get started, I want to thank our fellow podcast alum, Matt Forcom. He loaned me his professional podcasting mic so that my audio quality would be leaps and bounds better than last time.
Yeah, that's one of those friends, and he's a good guy for doing that.
Good guy to know. So I hadn't realized it'd been so long myself. I had to go back and re-listen to my last episode, and I had to look at my calendar to see when it was. And I realized that, so since then I've actually gotten married, and our wedding was only a few weeks after that episode was recorded. Then more recently, my wife and I have learned we are expecting our first child, a girl, in May.
Wow, some big changes since the last time we talked.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's awesome.
In terms of the layout, I've now had 9 op sessions since the last podcast, and half of which, ironically, were the last 2 weeks of 2023 before Christmas, because I had to take it off work because my PTO didn't roll over.
Yep.
So I had an operating session blitz. Switch lists are still going well. I'm using JMRI Operations Pro. Lots of good feedback. I heard multiple times from people, especially people with larger, more traditional layouts. They were impressed how long and complex that I've been able to make op sessions with such a simple layout.
Yeah, that's really cool to do. I know mine's a smaller layout too, but sometimes it's not the running room. It's the ops itself and the scheme that can make it just that much more enjoyable and that much more lengthy.
Amen. Yeah, I've implemented very intentional things to slow people down.
Now, tell us about that. What are some of the things that you've done to figure out how to lengthen your operating session?
So I think the big 3 probably are 2-man crews, lots of momentum and braking function, and of course the proto throttle, but that's not a requirement, in all engines, and locked switches.
Okay.
So I can't take credit for that. Sadly, that was done long before me by another fellow podcast alum, Joe Atkinson. He did it. I'm not sure he did it first, but he popularized it, and he had an article in the old MRH forums about how he did it. And I basically copied and pasted that with a few tweaks onto my layout using small TSA padlocks and little eyelets onto the knobs.
Well, they say 80% of art is stealing, and model railroading is an art. So I guess that all qualifies, and no, good ideas are meant to be shared. And that's really cool that you've implemented that on your layout and it extends your operating scheme. And then you mentioned 2-man crew. So tell me how many guys you're able to host on your layout.
So it's only 1 2-man crew. So 2 guys. Okay. If I have a third, usually they just kind of talk or we chat, or technically you can run a 3-man crew, but they're more of a spectator. My next layout, I definitely want to have the ability of having a few more people over, just so I can have more friends over and keep them busy. But yeah, just 2 for now.
do you have a fight of friends that try to get into the 2-man spot, or you got it pretty sorted out? I mean, you said that you went on kind of a blitz when you used up your vacation time, and I think that's a pretty good way to use your vacation time, if you ask me. But how do you do that with a good rotation? Because you got quite a few good friends out there.
Yeah, I just had 2 people over each session, sometimes 3, but they just wanted to talk trains. The third one, I should say.
Yeah, that's great. So how long's your operating session?
It was scheduled as 2 hours. Probably went a little over that. And I also run. I can run multiple days worth of a session. Each op session, each day, I should say, is a local that runs up and works all of the carload industries. So 2 fertilizer plants, and then the lumber dealer and a transload.
Okay.
And that takes about an hour. And then a grain train comes up and swaps unit grain trains at Heyworth. And that also, people were surprised at how long it took. Just 10 cars in, 10 cars out. But the way I've set it up, you have to do a little dance to run around your train. It takes a long time for people to figure it out and get it straightened out in their head.
That's what you want, right? A good challenge, something that makes them think a little bit. It's not too easy. It's also not too hard where they have to, bang their head on the wall and
right.
hurt themselves. Right. But how many jobs do you have on your layout?
Just those. Well, I've got a bunch of ones that I play around with myself, but for an official op session, I've just got 2 trains symbol. The local, the symbol is L554. And then the grain train, the symbol is G889, which are just prototype symbols that I've heard in my rail fanning or seen and researched.
Awesome. I know that in the first podcast we talked about your observations of the prototype and how that's helped you and all that research that you've done. And now I see even in your group you've got a section that you've put away for even your weathering prototype photos. Is really neat how that prototype has really influenced you all the way around on this layout.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of research, I've dove even deeper, exponentially deeper into research. I was inspired by, again, former podcast alums, such as Matt Fricks and Joe Atkinson and Ryan Crawford, who I guess is not an alum yet, but he knows Tony Cook, and I'm sure he'll be on the podcast before long.
I like the yet part. That's good.
But so they all have their own versions and encouraged me to create a research database, Matt especially, in Microsoft Excel or some other similar program. So I've done that, and I've now have over 2,000 entries in that database. So that's individual car numbers, and then all the characteristics, so car type, car color, lading if I know it, a bunch of other things that help me model it, and engines. Oh. And then the train and location, date, everything, all the info I can get from any of the mostly YouTube videos. I'll put a YouTube video on 20 or quarter speed, or I still have to pause it sometimes, and I'll just let it go, and I'll enter in all the car information as it goes. I have to pause it a lot because I can't go even 0.25 speed is usually too fast, but it's been a lot of fun. And so then, and it covers, it's not only a certain year, it's the whole decade, basically of the 2000s. So whatever I can find. There's research or info on what I'm modeling is extremely sparse. So I'll take what I can get over the entire decade. Like I said, it's mostly old YouTube videos. Occasionally it'll be a picture, and I'll just do a generic, like it's a gray covered hopper, and I don't have a reporting mark for it. It's filterable, so it's nice. So I can filter things. So I can say, I wonder if I ever saw one of those cars, or if I have researched one of these cars in my database, and I can look it up. And this car just came out by this manufacturer. I can buy one of those. And of course, not everything's captured in my database, so there's still some allowances for cars that aren't in the database, or a lot of allowances because there's still such few data or info on my prototype. But it's been so much fun. I've also saved it to Microsoft OneDrive, and then I have the app on my phone, so I can open it up at train shows and shops to do research on the fly and say, oh, is this a car I need? Is this a car I don't need?
Well, you're far more advanced than I am. I print out a piece of paper. I guess I'm old school and kind of carry what my roster is, and
I have that as well.
Recognize a car, but yeah, it's pretty wild. So 2000. I mean, in this research that you've done, I mean, you probably thought you knew quite a bit about it before all this research. What is some of the things that have surprised you as you're doing this project and, adding new research and building this into a database?
Oh gosh, there was so much that it's hard to kind of single anything out. I don't have it open. I could pull it up, but I should say one of the more recent things I did, I put in, I had refrained from putting in a lot of unit cranes just because I'm not modeling any currently besides grain trains. So I put in, after Tangent's last announcement of their ICG Centralia quad hoppers to 36 or 38 34s, which were sadly too old for me slightly. Okay. But it kind of bodes for a future release of the cars that I do need, which are basically rebuilt versions of those. So I put my last 200 entries into my database of that 2000 were all coal trains, CN coal trains. They just kind of like my covered hopper fleet in my era, those coal trains were a rainbow. They had black IC covered hoppers. They had former C&W HLMX patched hoppers. They had Chicago Central hoppers that had faded to pink. Former Rock Island hoppers that were patched to BLE, Bessemer Lake Erie, and a bunch of other ones. So I just love finding all those hidden gems, and there's a lot of similar ones with covered hoppers. As I said last episode, covered hoppers are my vice, my favorite. There's just a ton of things like, I never knew that covered hopper scheme was patched to that railroad or whatnot. Especially the IC. The IC, absolutely. The CNIC. Their combined covered hopper fleet is absolutely unparalleled in terms of scheme diversity and different models.
That must make it a bit of a challenge to try to get to that, precision that you may be seeking. With such a diversity, a run of cars may not cover all of it in a certain scheme, right?
That's the fun of it.
Yeah. So tell me about the fun of it. What are some of the things you do? So if you were getting a run, talk about some of the changes that you might make to try to get these a little bit more precise.
So one of the things I've done, especially for more uniform unit trains, for example, like an ADM unit train that's mostly ADM cars, or a Staley unit train, which my layout has 2 Staley elevators on it, Staley, Tate, and Lyle, the grain processor. Okay. So I'll take a single train, so say 100 cars, I'll copy it from my database to another sheet, and then I'll split it up into by car type, or however it makes sense to best split it up. Car type or color or scheme, and then I'll make each car type a percentage of that 100 cars. If it's 100, it's easy because 30 cars is 30%.
Right.
And then I'll say, how long do I want my model train to be? In my case, unfortunately, my 100 car trains are compressed to 10 cars. So I divide it by 10. Okay. So if I have 30%, so this train had 30% of car A, 30% of car B, 40% of car C. For my 10-car model train, I have 3 cars of A, 3 cars of B, 4 cars of C.
Wow, you're putting a lot of thought into that, my friend. That's amazing, and it sounds like you really are passionate about getting that accuracy and doing the math to figure all that out. That's maybe some beyond some folks, but I think it's a really cool idea. And then it's that it's a good representation of what the prototype was doing.
Right. Yeah, I really enjoy it. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. But it's
right.
Part of the fun for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that you, I know your love for covered hoppers. You can see that easily in your group as you scroll down. There's a lot of covered hopper coverage, and we chatted about a few because I've got a few on mine that will eventually find themselves on the sale table. But you had some Canadian cylindrical hoppers and some CSX hoppers as well in there, and just an amazing mix of stuff that you got. And I see you out weathering them as well.
Yeah. I try to weather what I can. I'm not above outsourcing it when I took for the hard, tough cars, when I've got a bunch of those in storage that I haven't gotten to yet, or that need patch decals. Like I said, the CNIC's hopper fleet was unparalleled in its diversity, and that's largely due in part to all the patch out or second hand, third hand, fourth hand covered hoppers that mainly the IC and the CN bought in the 90s. and then had it still in my era. CN especially bought a bunch of former NAHX, North America Leasing, 4750s that were of all different schemes, because so the way that those work, similar with PTLX cars, is that they were when they were built, they were originally leased to a certain company, some grain co-op, grain elevator, some milling company or something, and they would be leased for a certain amount of time. And then when that lease went up, they went back into PTLX's generic lease fleet. They still had the paint scheme, the colorful red, yellow, green paint scheme from their original leasee, but they were now in the general lease fleet, and kind of went everywhere. And then eventually they were bought secondhand by both IC and CN, had a bunch of them. So you have cars in the similar number range owned by the same railroad, but they're super diverse and colorful and a bunch of different schemes.
Oh, that's awesome. But you talked about, not being above sending stuff out. And we've talked about that on the show before, as we've talked to many different modelers and even some suppliers and in the sort. What is the breaking point for you to say, okay, it's time to farm this out? You said you like to do weathering, but what is it that says, okay, this one's got to go to somebody? Currently for me, the biggest thing is fading. A lot of the covered hoppers are originally really bright, green, yellow, blue. The ICG ones especially are bright orange. And then you just need faded a bunch before you can even start weathering them. And I have never quite gotten the hang of my airbrush. I'll get around to it eventually, but I haven't never quite gotten around to it. That and to a lesser extent, some fine rust detailing are the two biggest ones, but also decaling and patching. A lot of the cars just I don't have decals for yet. One of my things on my to-do list this year is to have a whole sheet of all the patch decals that I need printed out, because I've got the base cars. Like just off the top of my head, I have a former Penn Central 4750 that will be a DWC patched. I have an Alaska 4750 that will be IC patched, a Rock Island 4750 that would be IC patched, a pink NAHX Cleamy co-op car that will be CNA patched, which is a CN subsidiary, and a ton of other ones. And so every single one of them needs their own decals, and sometimes the font's all off, and I'm really bad at matching the own font. And so my plan is to either have a friend or have PDC make me custom decal sheets for each one of those. Tell me about PDC. Who are those folks? PDC is Precision Design Company. I have not had any personal experience with them, but a lot of people who I'm friends with or hold in high regard have used them and have had nothing but great things to say about. Matt Fricks has had him do some custom stuff for them off prototype pictures. Rob Gruber, who's a guy who hasn't been on the layout, but he models a similar era, also the CNIC to me, in Illinois, just different subdivision. He's had them do a bunch of IC stuff actually. So he might even already have the patches. I just see, hey, can I use Rob's patch decals and add those to my list? Yep. Nice. Yeah, it's awesome to have those amazing vendors out there now. I mean, God, I just keep repeating myself over and over, but just that golden era stuff just keeps coming back. You have people out there that are able to produce this stuff. It used to be just a mystery kind of thing, say 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now it's just like all this stuff's available. You can pretty much do whatever you want in the hobby. I mean, if it's all there. Yep. The world's your oyster. It sure is. So talk about some of the other projects. We talked about that and doing some farming out, and I see got me excited because I saw a Scale Sound Systems box. So I think you're doing some locomotive upgrading as well. Tell us about your locomotive fleet and then what you're up to. So that's twofold. I'm converting brands, not for any brand loyalty or anything, just because I told somebody who's not in the model rating world, who's just over the other day, I'm min-maxing my trains, but I switched. So first of all, I switched from Digitrax to NCE, and there's really just two reasons for this. First of all, like I said, I use the Proto Throttle almost exclusively to run trains, and the Digitrax you have to use one of their Wi-Fi modules, the LinWi, to connect your Proto Throttle, whereas with the NCE was nice and actually worked with Iowa Scaled Engineering to develop
the Iowa Scale Engineering NCE proto throttle receiver, it's literally a direct plug-in. You don't have to set it up or anything. So that was a big plus. And also the NCE, you may know, NCE handles advanced consisting slightly different than Digitrax does, and that you can do it from the hammerhead.
Yes.
And this was, again, I learned this and was encouraged by Matt Fricks and Joe Atkinson, because they both switched to NCE and use it for consisting. And that slight difference, especially coupled with how I wanted to use it with the proto throttle, was all the reason I needed to switch. So I just got a power cab and the new proto throttle receiver, and was off to the races.
I can tell you why I'm an NCE guy, because there's a guy named Don Iris who passed around Kool-Aid around the Tri-State Railroaders group, and we all took a sip of it. And again, there's multiple ways of going about it, but the one I say, and you mentioned your friends and the one I always encourage when it comes to choosing and making that choice of what operating system you're going to be on, one of the key factors I think you should consider is, what are your friends doing? Because it allows kind of that support group to be right near you. It's like, okay, you're using NC, I'm using NC. One, I can bring my throttle over to your place, and not the other part is I can call you up and ask you if you've ever had this problem. And that's fortunate to me. I have the Don Iris hotline I can call and get NCE help. And I'm sure it helps that your buddies are running it as well.
Well, it's funny, actually. A lot of my local buddies are all still Digitrax. They don't use proto throttles, but I still have the other NCE group guys to call on, so it works out. And then the like I said, those nuances were all I needed to switch. And then I'm going to Scale Sound Systems. Well, I'm not necessarily going to Scale Sound Systems, but in everything that I'm putting sound in that doesn't already have sound in it is getting Scale Sound Systems speakers. Then I'm converting most of my fleet from Soundtrax to ESU. Well, I will be. Okay. I haven't quite started yet. And that's just ESU V5. You can program your own sounds and stuff. I've been lazy in that 98% of my locomotive fleet is all Athearn, just because Athearn's made all the IC and CN models that I've wanted almost exclusively up until recently, with a few exceptions. And sure, they came factory with Soundtrack, so it was just the easy thing to do before I knew any better. Right. But now that I know better, I'm going to start the slow and painful process, switching them all over to ESU.
Yeah. So ESU, and you said for custom, you're not doing custom sound. You're doing the stock sound, or are you actually recording your own stuff as well? What are you up to?
No, I'll use stock sound files, but the ability to program custom logic into ESU V5s is really appealing to me, and certain things that you can do with that.
Yeah, I'm an ESU owner, although I see all these other companies too, and I try to run middle of the road here, but I can say that I'm an ESU user as well. And again, a great support system that's been provided by others that are using ESU, and being able to ask questions, because it does help. And ESU's support, there's an opportunity for them to improve for sure. And I've gone through some manuals, and some words are still left in German. They didn't make the translation but it's good to have a support system, and it's a great decoder, and I've had nothing but good luck with them. And, all of my fleet is now falling under ESU, but you've got a fleet of heavy Athearn. What's your favorite locomotive of the ones you have? You can't put me on the spot. So like picking children. I mean, you don't have your kid quite yet, but
I really don't. I like 38 Jeep 38-2s. Both ICs and GTWs are the main ones you'd see a lot in my era. But I also love SD40, straight SD40s. I don't have a ton of those, but and then I guess if I had to pick my favorite, which nobody makes, is the IC's SD40A, which was a stretched SD40 on an SDP 45 frame, so that it had a extended fuel tank. So it could go. I can't remember the original two destinations. It was IC or Chicago to Memphis or something like that without refueling.
Oh wow!
But they're literally
what they do. You say they extend
SD40.
So they put an extended fuel tank. Did they extend the frame on it? You said
they used the frame from an SDP 45, which is already longer, and just slapped an SD40 car body on top.
Amazing the stuff that the railroad did custom to meet their needs.
And so both Scale Trains and Athearn both have the correct frame Athearn with the SD P45 and Scale Trains with their SD40X, which uses the same frame for the SD40A. So it's a race to the finish to who will make the top part or the rest of it into a full model first for all those IC guys.
Well, certainly their latest announcement about hypotypical and the things that they're doing as they start to expand their offerings, fingers crossed that maybe they'll get that done for you.
Oh, yeah. It'll happen eventually. It's just waiting for the day.
So what else are you up to on this layout? You've got, this long period of time that we haven't talked. I'm sure there's far more that you've also accomplished.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I backdated 2 years. Prior, I was set in 2008, which was basically the most modern I would ever go, because as I mentioned in the last episode, which I listened to earlier today, just so I could remember what I said last time. There was a lot of IC SD40s and actually the SD40As and SD40-2s that were all scrapped in 2009 and 10. And those are some of my favorite engines as well. So I couldn't stand to model them being at an era after they were scrapped. So 2008 was the most modern I could go, but I could slide backwards as well, and that's kind of what I ended up doing. Practically, it really just means that I have fewer CN repainted, mainly Jeeps. As you know, as CN has bought the IC and a lot of the other areas too, the GTW, the eGen-E, and all the other ones, they're pretty slow, at least compared to other class ones. They're actually really slow to repaint former fallen flag engines, but they still do it, and they just do it when convenient, when it comes in for a major rebuild or after it gets wrecked or whatnot. And simply backdating those 2 years just means that I have fewer of those repaints. They particularly did a kind of a repainting blitz on some of the former IC XG-Mino Jeeps in that era. So backdating means I just have more of the Death Star black ones instead of repainted CN ones. Which
is something I think we kind of all wish when we see our favorite flag fall. You just hope that paint kind of lingers for a while and you don't get to see it and you go away very fast. I know I feel that way about the P&W and New England Central Railroad. Both are now G&W railroads. And
yep.
I don't know, that orange does pop in the fall, but it doesn't look good any other time. So, it's good to see our heritage paint still out there and them being slow to the paint booth. And I'm sure maybe you feel the same way about the fallen flag of the IC.
Yeah. Well, we've got 3 G&W roads in Peoria, actually, the TP&W, the INM, the Illinois Midland, and the Tazewell in Peoria. And they're all orange, no fallen flag paint schemes anymore, but that's beside the point. Modeling CNIC is kind of a deal. You made a deal with the devil, because you want the IC stuff, but you also, me and Rob Gruber both feel this way. Especially it's funny to talk to all the IC modelers that don't like the CN. We embrace it. Like I said, we make a deal with devil, and we want both the IC stuff, but then we also want all the variety that comes after the merger with the CN stuff. Other CN roads, Grand Trunk and Western especially, they had a lot of Jeeps that filtered down into the IC territory right after the merger.
Yeah, I don't know a whole ton about CN. I do know that it does have a great scheme, and obviously it's a good historic class one that, if it's going to fall to anyone, I guess the CN would be a good place for it to fall to. And they've got like that pretty wild variety, the sergeant stripes on the side on some of the locomotives, and just some really cool schemes that now you, like you said, you get to incorporate that into your layout. Yep, for sure. And they also, one of the things I love that CN does is they almost never, well, they've started doing it recently, but especially if they're fallen flags that they buy out, the railroads that they buy out, they don't renumber or even reinitial things when they repaint them. So when you see a repaint CN, a repaint Illinois Central Jeep 38, it's still IC 9636, whatever the original number was. They don't renumber it, and then they keep the original railroad's initials on the cab under the window. I see that a lot. People will call it, it's CN 9636. Actually, it's IC 9636. And in some cases, there are both CN and IC engines on the roster with the same number. Wow. Yeah. So they must have done that for either that reason, or I'm sure there's like some kind of business money, something that happens with that where they're able to probably taxes or if you boil it down to stuff. International taxes. And then a lot of times those railroads still exist on paper, at least
they're trained into conglomerates. And I've heard from employees of CN that their paycheck still says Illinois Central or Grand Trunk Western.
Oh, that's cool. So they got a heritage paycheck.
Yeah.
per se, right? So no, that's really cool. And it's really neat that, that history remains and where the locomotive came from, just from basically from its road name by seeing that.
Just super simple.
I was talking to Matt Fricks, and he mentioned the work that you've also been doing off of your layout and more on with his track designing and helping him kind of reel in where he's going. Talk a little bit about what you've been helping Matt with. Yeah,
so I think Matt mentioned it in his episode a bit, but I didn't know much about the Gateway Western until I went to college in Edwardsville, which is not alongside, but nearby, where the former Gateway Western, now KCS, now KCCP or CPKC. And I met some friends who basically told me about it, and I did my own research. It's like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then one day, back when I was still joining Facebook groups like I had no business, because now I had to count the other day. I'm in over 200 Facebook groups.
Holy moly!
And not all of those are train groups, but the majority of them are. And
good.
But I joined Matt Fricks's Gateway Western group, and I was like, this is cool. And I'd been doing track plans, and I didn't know what I was getting into myself. But he posted, I think, a sketch of what he wanted to do, and I'm like, that's a bit rough. You want some help track planning? And the rest history. So he had already had his basement started building, and he had the pony walls up. His nice, pretty well finished basement, very presentable. So I just had to fit the layout to the bench work, and he had a rough idea of how everything needed to go. But I actually nailed down where all the switches, every switch went, you know what I mean? Actually formalized the track plan for him, and it's been a great relationship.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Matt's got a great thing going. Like you mentioned, that finished basement, he's going to have an awesome presentation down there with his layout and the time that he spent, finishing ceilings and pony walls and the sheetrock and trim, and just the how clean it's going to be down there. And then to get a guy like you who knows what he's talking about when it comes to track planning and help him drill it in and focus on what he needs for good ops and a good representation at the Gateway Western. That's a pretty cool relationship. And that all developed online?
Yeah, entirely. Met online, and then it took us a while. I think I went up to his house one day to kind of finalize it, and that's the first time we met.
How far is he from you?
He's about 2 hours north.
Well, that's not too terrible. That's still within, obviously the driving distance, and yeah, it's good to have him within the neighborhood. And then you also got a good friend in Matt Forkham, obviously loaning you a microphone, and and then I've seen you doing some operations with him as well. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Matt as well, and there's also another guy in Peoria who I'm pretty close with named Kyle Brown, and Matt also introduced him to me. And collectively, we are the Peoria Proto Throttle Gang, because we're three Peoriaites or Peoria locals in the area who use proto throttles, and we have a group chat named that.
The PPG, the Peoria Peoria Proto Throttle Gang. That's a mouthful, but that's a good.
PPG is Pittsburgh Place Class. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So awesome stuff.
So Kyle's an Iowa Interstate modeler. He's in the Iowa Interstate Mafia.
Another Mafia family member. Cool.
He's working on bench work currently, so we'll get him on eventually too, after he gets some track going.
Yeah, my plan is to expose the entire Iowa Interstate family and bring them all out and find out who they are. And
you're on track.
I'm working on it, and definitely be good to hear more about these folks. And I see some Iowa Interstate models coming up with the M420s that I think Spring Creek Model Trains is coming out with. So I'm sure at least a few of them are excited about that release.
Oh, yeah. And Joe had high praise for those.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. And a lot of really cool stuff coming out of these manufacturers. That's why I love having Tony on here. We talk about new products coming out, and I'm sure, but that's one thing that's nice about what you've done. You've made some flex. You've actually drilled yourself down so that you don't get caught up too much in those weeds. Is seemingly, what you want, and you're able to drill in and avoid some of that temptation.
Yeah. It's not too hard for me, thankfully. I think that in a good way, all the research I've done has really solidified my focus on the CN.
I think it's a good lesson for other folks as well. Something to hear, you talk about budget, or if you want to stay on a budget, drill yourself into something that keeps you, honest, and pick an era and stick to it, because there's so much temptation out there. I mean, I'm running, P&W on a switching layout in my basement, but I'd love to own every single one of the Gevos that Scale Trains comes out with. And, you gotta be disciplined. It's like, that 6-axle doesn't go in, into the tunnel and cross the bridge. It's just not going to work. It doesn't fit. So you have to narrow your focus and kind of really drill into your why, as we've talked about many a times. And it seemed that you have been able to accomplish that.
Yeah, for sure. The drilling into the why especially is I think I found a good way to kind of conceptualize it, in that I'm not doing this just to be able to run whatever trains I want. I'm doing this so I can have a time machine that brings me back to the CNIC, Heyworth Spur, or in the future, the Gilman sub, in 2006 or the 2000s era when I was a kid. The stuff that I kind of remember is kind of catching glimpses of here and there, but didn't actually experience.
Yeah, that's definitely a great why. You know it, and now you're heading towards it. That's phenomenal. So, talk about some other operating you've done, because I know you've been over to Alan Satkamp's. There's another guy that we've had on the podcast, and he just loves when you guys come over and operate his layout. So tell us a little bit about operating his layout.
He is the most reliable operator I've ever. I think in the world, maybe. His operating sessions are just very, very consistent and very repeatable, and he has, in terms of scheduling, I should say, and very reliable and just great. But he's actually changed themes, I think, twice since you've interviewed him, maybe once or twice since you've interviewed him.
Oh, boy.
And he had an article in the last model railroad planning issue that he did that. He basically, this is how he enjoys. He enjoys researching kind of the broader railroad, and he'll keep his layout, the track, the bench work, and most of the track. He'll change a few switches here and there. He'll keep all that fairly the same, and then he'll change all of the all the engines, all or most of the engines, most of the rolling stock, and most of the buildings, and he'll model a completely different prototype.
Wow. Hey, have you been over there since he's made those changes?
Yeah, he's had 2 shakedowns on his most recent theme, which is Progress Rail in Minnesota. And he's had 2 shakedown sessions. I was part of the first one, and it was great.
Isaac, it's just you and me here. Did he make it better or worse?
He did definitely better, because now he was using cars and waybills for the entire thing, which personally I don't like, but I don't have anything against somebody else's layout. But now half the layout uses a switch list, and I'm all for a switch list, so I enjoyed it. Awesome.
Yeah, he mentioned on the podcast that he had a tendency to change, and that I think he even hinted during the podcast that he might be looking to do it. It looks like he's gone and done it, and it's good that it turned out for the better for himself, and he's doing what he wants to do, and you guys are going over there and enjoying it. And then, speaking of friends, I know that one of the things you have coming up here, the episode that we're recording now may air after, but let's talk about your plans for Amherst. I know that you're making the trek out here to New England to take in Amherst. Let's start. Have you ever been to Amherst?
Nope.
Oh, so this is your first time coming to check out the Railroad Hobby Show. Tell us about your plans, because I know it's beyond just operating. Going to the Railroad Hobby Show. You have some other things going on as well.
Yeah, so I'm just hitchhiking with Matt Fricks, who's driving over there, basically doing the same thing that he did last year, and he talked about in his episode, which was basically you recorded right after Amherst last year.
Right.
We're going to couch surf a couple model railroaders for couple nights and stay in hotels others. We're going to hit, I believe, Neil Schofield's, which is a bucket list layout of mine. We're going to operate on Mark Herrick's. I believe we might go to Ken Karlowitz's D&H layout. And I'm sure a few others that I'm missing. And then we'll spend all Saturday at the show and drive back Sunday.
That's awesome. You're hitting the cream of the crop when it comes to the layouts out here between Neil Schofield's, and I have not been able to go to Neil's, but I think I'm going to be tagging along with you guys.
Cool.
And then of course, Mark Herrick's BNSF Montana division. He's He's in that tri-state group that we all operate in, an outstanding layout. And I think you're going to have a blast operating that. And then Ken Karlowitz has a great reputation with a beautiful layout. Well, you're just going to have yourself a blast. And then the show itself. And I'm looking forward to seeing you there and getting to meet you in person. And then, of course, we'll do that beforehand on Friday night when we go up to Neil's house and check out his layout. And what a cool opportunity to take a road trip out with some buddies out from Illinois and be able to go see this.
Yeah, for sure. I figured that with the baby on the way, it might be my last good chance for a while to get it in. So I definitely happy to be able to do it. I'm super excited to be able to meet you and everybody else. I need to make a list of everybody I need to see and all the booths I need to hit. So.
Yeah, if you can do that with the research that you've done, you can also take the list of vendors and sort the Excel spreadsheet. Yeah. I did that one year and just said, okay, here's the ones I definitely got to see, and
rank them.
Yeah, rank them, or put them in. And I like to put them in building and table order, so at least you know, and because it really is, 4 buildings, 350,000 square feet. It is. At least at first, you walk through the door, and depending on how cold it is, maybe your eyes, like mine, will start to water a little bit. And
it's pretty cold here too right now.
Yeah, and then it's like sensory overload for the first 15 minutes, right? Like you just got to get yourself in and kind of settle in a little bit, and then you start to see things, and then you'll pass by and go, "How the heck did I even walk by this?" It's amazing that. There's just so much there. It's an amazing show, and I'm so glad you're able to come out and check it out.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I already do that walk by things that I thought I already saw at smaller shows, and I think the biggest show I've been to yet has just been the St. Louis RPM, which is amazing in its own right, but in terms of sheer size, can't hold a candle to Amherst.
Well, I think and for different purposes though, Amherst is very much Amherst is a great place to buy. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And John Zaccardotti talks about it in the preview show, just how much money changes hands there. It's absolutely amazing.
Yep.
But, you get to see things, you get to see product, you get to see. But I'm looking forward, as much as you're making your first trek out to West Springfield, I'm hoping to make my first trek out to St. Louis and check out the St. Louis RPM, because I think for that, to be able to see work that folks have done and see that prototype modeling, I'm really looking forward to being able to check that out and see, on that high level, folks that are, producing just some outstanding models.
Yeah, for sure. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I'm going to make the RPM this year, but that's all right. I'll take the Amherst 1 year over missing the RPM 1 year. But when you do, for sure, I'm actually only 2 hours north of St. Louis. I might miss it because we might have a family vacation that week, and the baby will only be 3 months old. But there's also a layout down there that I used to operate when I was in college that I usually run, and then we usually have 2 sessions on, one Saturday night and one Friday night. And Matt's been to that one a couple times, and we'll get you over to that one if you want to.
Oh, of course. I'm always looking forward to seeing other layouts and making visits, and an opportunity to get a throttle in my hand and be able to experience them is all things I just love to do. And again, St. Louis will be a fun opportunity. I know Tony Cook will be out there, and we've already made jokes that Tony's going to have to get himself a bigger Lincoln to pile everybody in, between myself and Mike Ostertag and Shane Mason and all those folks that are out in that area that attend the St. Louis RPM. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So hoping to get myself out there to see that. So glad you're coming out to New England to be able to check all these layouts out. Like I said, you're going to have a blast at Mark's, and I'm sure we're going to have a blast at Neil's, and I'm sure Ken's is going to be a very enjoyable experience for you. Plus you'll get to see a little bit of the New England thing. I mean, when you get up towards West Springfield, you can see a lot of the CSX stuff that's up there, but there's a lot of other cool things to see around here as well. But if you get a chance to do that, but awesome to be able to spend some time in the car, even in between, talking trains and having that experience is going to be a real blast.
For sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And I'll give you some bad dad advice as we start to wrap the show up. Babies sleep a lot. So don't worry about it at first. They do sleep a lot. and you'll still be able to sneak in that modeling, and I'm sure you're going to make some great progress still on the CNIC Heyworth sub. So I think that's going to be a good future for you. But it's awesome. One of the best things you can ever do is start a family. So congratulations to you and your wife, and wish you all the best in that. As we do wrap up here, Isaac, why don't you tell me what's your next big project other than having a baby? What do you say is the next big move for the CNIC?
I need to actually quantify some of my goals for this year. Right now, I'm working on flashing crossing gates at Wapella, which is the only flashing gates on the entire layout that I've modeled, and everything else is just a crossbuck. We're working on those. I'd like to get my 3D printer up and running, and so I can print the both the elevators. That's what I bought the printer for, is to be able to 3D print the elevators and a few other things. I just haven't been able to fine tune it quite yet to get some good prints. I also plan to do the Kickapoo Creek scene, which is on the north end of the layout. It's a cool twin girder bridge with an interesting concrete pillar in the middle that I'm also going to 3D print. To answer your question, scenery is the next biggest thing.
Awesome.
I want to do a big scenery push this year and get some scenery done, get a little more presentable. Because as exciting as the baby is, of course, it technically starts the timer for the end of the Heyworth Spur. We can fit one baby in this house, but if we have a second, when we have a second, there's no if. When we have a second, we'll be looking at a new house. That'll spell the end of the Heyworth Spur, but not the end of the CN. I'll always, as far as I can envision, I'll always be modeling the CNIC in the 2000s. I just probably won't model the Heyworth Spur again.
Let's speculate a little bit. You get into a house with 2 or more kids, and you have a little bit more space, and hopefully everything's worked out that way. What do you think your next one might be?
There's no thinking. I already know what it's going to be. My dream goal is so the Heyworth Spur goes north out of Clinton. My south staging is Clinton, my hometown. So what I want to model is Clinton to Springfield, Illinois, which is the south end of the CN Gilman sub from Gilman to Springfield. And I'd like to keep the Heyworth Spur, or remodel the Heyworth Spur at least in some form. Because there's grain trains that basically went up from Heyworth and that I model now, but they went further on along the Gilman sub that I could also model. And Springfield's cool because it's where I interchange with both Matt Fricks's and Ryan Crawford's layouts, albeit in 3 different eras. But all 3 of our prototypes collide there. We would all model similar trackage, and we would all interchange cars, albeit 3 different years. But yeah, that's a really cool aspect of it.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Well, you got a plan, and I'm sure it'll come to fruition. You're ambitious, you get stuff done, and it'd be cool that you'll be able to incorporate some of the current layout into your new dream layout. And do you see a lot more running on that as far as are you talking bigger trains? Are you talking more trains? What do you think what it kind of looks like in your head?
A bit of both. To do it right, it'd be about 8 different towns. And I know that's a lot to bite off, a lot to chew, coming from my Heyworth Spur that has 2 towns on it. Yeah. But I am aware of that. I've already got track plans for this. You know me. And so my plan is to use the one module approach and build each town individually. And even if we move a second time, a third time in the future, instead of building the Heyworth Spur, I didn't quite build the Heyworth Spur to be moved. So it'll kind of get torn down, and obviously I can salvage the buildings and stuff, but the benchwork itself isn't conducive to being rebuilt, which is fine. So I don't want to redo it in the next house. I'll do it eventually, but not the next house. So yeah, the one module approach is definitely where I'm going to go next, so that I don't have to tear down my work, my ever so snail pace layout building pace. So I can keep building and not have to restart every time we move.
No, this really reminds me of the conversation we had with Lance Minheim, which was, start small, and you've done that with your current layout, where now you've been able to fine tune your why, what you're interested in, and that you have the passion and desire to continue to go forward and build something bigger and have that, because you're really enjoying what you're doing, and you found that you can do it. I think a lot of people, that are out there can make that mistake of start with a huge empire and never finish it because it's just such an overwhelming task, where even your module approach will definitely help you because it's benchmarks. It's a one at a time. It's a bit at a time. It's digestible, I guess, for lack of a better term. So really great approach. And I think a lot of folks that are listening right now could definitely get a takeaway from that for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Well, I'm not tearing down the Heyworth Spur quite yet. I'm going to try to get it as done as possible and learn all that I can about scenery and all there is left to learn from this layout, and then start anew.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Isaac, I'm so glad that you came by and got us up to date on the CNIC Heyworth Spur. And again, looking forward to seeing you in just a couple weeks. Likewise. For Amherst. And I think what we'll do is I think we're going to have to get the whole gang together back on a future podcast, and we'll talk about that adventure and kind of recap it, the Amherst experience. I think it'll be a lot of fun to hear your take on it, along with Matt and everybody else to kind of chime in and tell us what they thought of it. So we'll look for that in the future. But for now, Isaac, you take care, and good luck to you and your wife on the child. And I think you're going to have a lot of fun.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. Past episodes and more can be found on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.